Hello there, Darksiders. I hope everyone's doing well today. So, this bit of news caught my attention. Marvel Comics Star Wars is coming out with Age of Resistance. It's supposed to be a short story of series that revolve around characters of the Sequel Trilogy era. Now, it's supposed to be similar to the Age of Republic comic books that came out, and for the most part, I haven't heard a lot of negative things about the Age of Republic, but the Age of Resistance, the question is it coming at the right time or is it too little too late? Now, let me explain why for a second. I still stand by my previous statements that I do believe that the sequel trilogy does have a villain crisis. They've pretty much backed themselves into a corner. They got no real good villains from their creation, and they've done a poor job at really explaining like how the First Order was able to conquer the whole galaxy with one invasion. I mean, just a little bit of, comparison when you have the rise of the Empire, Palpatine's Empire compared to the rise of the First Order. Even Palpatine, most of the systems willingly joined the Empire. They willingly were like, yeah, okay, we'll do this. But even the Empire had to go and conquer. They still had to fight and conquer other planets. And from what we're being told of the First Order's regime, is they basically moved in and either faced little to no resistance. They just came in and conquered immediately. I mean, that's not a very good selling point, especially when we don't know the extent of their full power. Now, they had Starkiller Base, correct. And they had that giant, like a Death Star beam that we saw in The Last Jedi, so clearly the First Order does have technology, but the thing is like, are these one-hit wonders? Is this the only version they have? Or do they have multiple versions with multiple deployment areas? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's highly that I'm just overthinking it, but I mean, it's just something to think about that I've been trying to see, with new canon novels and comics, and it's just something we haven't really seen at all. And plus, in comparison, the resistance was very small, but yet they were apparently large enough to harass the First Order tremendously. You see what I'm getting at? So then we have the Age of Resistance comics, which coming in is going to tell us more stories about the First Order, Kylo Ren's training, Snoke, the Resistance, etc. And honestly, I think it's too late. I honestly think it's too late. I mean, I don't think that comic series is going to really sell too well because it's just at this point in time, there's just not a lot of interest in the sequel trilogy because just a lot of people have kind of thrown it down and said, I'm done with Star Wars. I mean, to be fair, I'm kind of at that point, but that's just me personally. Now, what they should have done, and if they were smart marketing wise, they would have released a series like this in between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, because like the sequel trilogy or not, no one can deny that after The Force Awakens, I mean, it was speculations everywhere. Interest was very high. People were curious about the First Order. People were curious about the Resistance. They were curious about Rey, curious about Snoke, curious about Ben Solo. The curiosity and wanting to know more was there. But the problem is, we didn't get any stories or any real comics other than the Poe Dameron comic really explaining or feeding into our curiosity. Now, they say because they wanted to keep everything a mystery. They wanted it to be a mystery, like, ooh, what's going to happen next? Nobody knows. Well, whether or not that was Disney's decision, Lucasfilm's decision, or the man himself, J.J. Abrams' decision, is a very good question because J.J. Abrams loves his mysteries. Just absolutely loves setting up mysteries and then not giving us answers later on. What can you do? But they should have released the Age of Resistance comic line there because they could have easily explained a lot of stuff about the First Order, the Resistance, Kylo Ren's training, all that stuff without any major spoilers to The Last Jedi, which, as we saw in The Last Jedi, not much really happened, except for Well, a lot of head scratching and like, what? What can you do though? I mean, that's what we got, and personally, it sucked. But see, that's when they should have released it. Now, me, I've been trying my best to keep up with the Star Wars Marvel comics. Now, I haven't done it recently, mainly because I've lost interest in a lot of the stories that they're telling now because they're still making out our original heroes to be the big heroes and everything, but when we get to the sequel trilogy, we know for a fact they don't become the heroes. They're not the legends that they should be. Now, I know that's probably a stupid reason, but that it's just for me it kind of kills the character development a little bit, especially knowing what they become. But anyway, sorry, sidetrack there. So, The Age of Resistance, I don't foresee myself reading it, and I don't foresee a lot of other people reading it, mainly because it's just the interest, I believe, is not there. They should have released this series a lot sooner to tell us the stories about how the First Order came, how they came to power, and everything. I mean, even the Phasma book and the Captain Phasma comic, they really didn't explain much about anything. And from what I've heard, I read the Phasma comic, but I haven't read the Phasma book. But from my understanding, the book has kind of been it was meh. It explained Phasma's story, trying to flesh her out a little bit, but unfortunately, she was a wasted character. It's sad, but what can you do? So they should have done that, and they should have told us more stories about the First Order after The Force Awakens, trying to help feed into the curiosity, feed into the information. And they could have easily done plenty of stuff without giving, away a lot of the stuff, but instead, all they did was just give us nitpicks, little pieces here, little pieces there. It's like they give you a puzzle piece, but then they take away 3/4 of the puzzle and expect you to finish the puzzle with that 1/4 of a quarter left you have. You can't do that. Now I understand. The original trilogy had what 30, 40 years to flesh out its story, and then the prequel trilogy. They had comics and such too, but they had the Clone Wars animation that really helped flesh out the story of the Clone Wars itself. And the sequel trilogy, what is it, Resistance, I believe, but as far as I can tell, it's mainly just about racing, and the second half of the season looks promising, but it's not really eventful. So, I mean, as far as I know, that really doesn't help out much of anything. And then the Age of Resistance comics coming out. I don't know if this is either going to help the sequel trilogy or not. I honestly don't know because there's a lot of damage because of The Last Jedi and just a lot of personal decisions that the directors and just the heads of Lucasfilm and Disney have done. I mean, it's hard to tell, honestly, folks. It's really hard to tell. But, I mean, hey, if you're interested, hey, there you go. Age of Resistance is coming out, supposed to explain a lot more of the villains and just all these other characters. Whether or not it's gonna actually help, I don't know. Because I'm not too sure if many people care about Snoke's origins anymore. And I'm not too sure anyone cares about Ben Solo's training anymore. And I definitely know for a fact they ain't gonna tell nothing about Rey. Because, JJ loves his mysteries and he's keeping her under tight wraps. I mean, I just don't see a lot happening with this comic because, they're forcing themselves to stay in this mystery zone with the sequel trilogy instead of building upon the sequel trilogy and trying to flesh out the galaxy in that time frame. Instead, Disney and Lucasfilm is too busy rewriting everything that happened during the Galactic Civil War. I mean, it's happening. I mean, you figure they would focus more on their sequel trilogy and building it before they start changing everything else, but they decided to go backwards. They're changing everything else in between the movies and then focusing on the sequel trilogy. And honestly, I think that's their biggest mistake. I truly think that's where they messed up a lot. They should have came out with this comic, and they should have came out with these stories at at the very beginning, and then they could have started giving us other Star Wars stories. Because, as I said, they really should have focused on building the universe in the sequel trilogy instead of rewrite the universe in the original trilogy and now in the Clone Wars trilogy. Anyway, that's all I have for you today, Darksiders. As I said, if you're interested, hey, there you go, new comics to read. If you're not interested, kind of like me, well, there's some Star Wars news for you. Oh, until next time, Darksiders. I'll see y'all later.